Hi, everybody. My name is Casey Nguyen. I'm going to be your instructor in CIS27 tonight. The roster does show a little bit more people, but we'll see if they're going to be able to join us tonight. This is a hybrid course, and it's supposed to prepare you for the Security Plus class. I know that many of you are in the apprenticeship program. A little bit of background about myself. I came to Moreno Valley College in 2018. I came from college in the desert, and before that, I was teaching for private school. I think I saw some of you in my other classes. So, as far as in the industry experience, I have been in the industry for close to 30 years. I've been in academia for, this is my 20th year. I started as a field technician in IT. After I got my bachelor degree, I worked my way up to network admin and system admin. For some local organization. The first company that hired me was EDS. I think they're still around. Eventually I transitioned over to management and doing cybersecurity. And I got a bachelor, a master's degree, and a PhD in cybersecurity because I know that it's here to stay. There's always going to be demand for the job because even with generative AI, we'll talk a little bit more about that. Because people have to be able to protect systems in order for the system to be automated. So you're here for CIS27, which the title is Network Information Security, but ultimately we're going to look at security strategies and practices for the industry. Every time that you come on Monday, you're going to have hands-on practice with me starting today. There will be time that we will configure systems and security systems. There will be time that we would look at, ethical hacking aspect a little bit. This class doesn't really focus on that. There's 27B for that, but you're going to have an introduction to that. There are times that we're going to set up accounts, server systems. So leaving this class, you should be able to have a lot of hands-on skills that's going to help you prepare for at least some entry-level position either in IT or security area. And I hope that I will also help you prepare for the certifications as you go through. Many of my students have gone on and have gotten certifications. Some of them are very successful in the field. The National Network Administrator for Whole Foods is one of my former students. Some of them actually also work for SpaceX, doing some engineering and communications. So there are a vast amount of different people that I've taught that are very successful, and I believe that you can be successful in this topic and also in your field. So there is a USB thing that's going around. Please take one and give it to your neighbor. That's your sticky. The intention is for you to save your assignments and lab work onto your USB. You're welcome to put it on the cloud. When we're working with virtual machines, there's going to be external hard drive that you're going to use. Because the USB, the 16 gigs, even though the size is accommodable for some of the smaller virtual machines, you're going to find that it does not like to transfer to flash technology like that. So I will teach you how you can access virtual machines starting today. This industry, you have to use virtual machine your way out, right? There are virtual machines that are available online like Hackbox or different platforms, but you have to know how to create and manage your own virtual machines for testing purposes. So we are going to go through the syllabus next if you don't have any questions or comments. This is a 3-credit course. We are going to have 54 hours lecture. I chose to have it hybrid because I wanted to make sure that you can maximize your time as a student. I can meet with you and we can be productive for the amount of hours that we are going to meet weekly. There are times that you're going to be working online on your own outside. Assignments, I like to address that in class along with some hands-on work. I record all my videos, so if you look at my channel, there are tons of repeated courses that I have taught and refined over the years. So I teach mostly in the cybersecurity area and also in programming and computer science. So some of you probably had me for Python or other programming classes. But
we are gonna meet once a week in this room, because of the holiday last Monday. We are gonna officially have our first meeting today, and I have planned your lessons subsequent, so you should be able to meet your objective by the end of the course. You are expected to have some outside work time. That means that we are gonna do some reading. There are gonna be time that you're gonna take online quizzes and exam. We only have one final exam in this course and a practice exam. That's gonna help you prepare for your certifications. You don't have to turn in your assignment at the end of the session. If you'd like to spend a little bit more time and go back and look at the video, you're welcome to do that. Most of the time, your assignments are gonna be due at the end of the week, and we'll talk about late policy and such. So what are we gonna talk about in this class? We're gonna talk about the domains for IT and cybersecurity. We're gonna look at regulations and standards. That's really important now, I think, privacy for California and the United States. In North America in general, for practices, we value a lot of like the individual privacy comparing to other part of the world. I'm not saying that they're lacking that, just, it's a little bit different in regulation. So you have to be aware that where your data is housed and how the technology is used is really coming back to how rules and laws are set for the nation, the state, or even the continent. So in the UK and the Europe, it's a little bit different in the application of regulations and standards. We'll take a look at malware. If you've watched my videos or some of my students have taken my forensic class, I do dissect malware and I really enjoy looking at that. So I'll expose you to some different type of malware and how you can see that from an aspect of like somebody that's monitoring the system. You can see it from a network monitoring all the way down to looking at how you can forensic malware. So my forensic class, they spend the first couple of weeks doing that. Because about 60% or less than 60% of malware is actually known. A lot of people say that if I install anti-malware security software on my computer, I'm fully safe. There's no 100% security in anything. Security implementation, the way that we have job security is it's about implementing solutions to buy time. It's not about, if it's going to happen, it's about when it's going to happen. And we're just delaying the process, right? We're delaying the time so that way, during that time, we can implement other things so that way we can have defense in depth to protect. And malware is an area that is rapidly growing from IoT devices all the way down to your mobile platform, to things that are coming in email traditionally, and it's still there. Ransomware is a big thing for a lot of industry like healthcare. So what you see is it's still being used. Some of the old viruses still being revamped. Some of the new ones are modified because source code has been updated, right, and reshared. We'll talk about different form of attacks. It's important to understand how they're attacking you in order to protect your systems. So we'll talk about denial of services, distributed denial of services, what those are. We'll talk about like brute force, if somebody is enumerating and trying to guess passwords. Now, even with generative AI, right, it's about resource usage. It's always a competition between the protector and the attacker. Who's gonna win? It's really about how you effectively use your resources. That's including time, processing power, storage, people, all your assets, and so on. And then we'll get into vulnerability assessment. So as I mentioned this to my CIS41A student, vulnerability assessment is the area that you're gonna work in. So when you apply for a position as a cybersecurity specialist, as a cybersecurity analyst, right, as a first responder for security, this is the area that you work in, okay? When you see an attack, it's really a threat taking advantage of the vulnerability. So an attacker is a threat, right? They looking at the flaws of your system, like your Windows OS, and they tap into that, and that's how they're able to, cripple your system. So that means that
what you need to do is you need to be ahead of the game. You need to know what's the weakness of your system to be able to protect it, right? Are we able to close out all the gaps? You know that Microsoft is always pushing updates, so we're always trying to catch up with security. At the same time, right, we have to be more proactive in what we do. And the fall down is that sometimes because of human error, things fall down, like people giving out information, people clicking on the link, things like that, right? That becomes a weakness in your infrastructure. So what we would see is we would look at how we can better, right, reduce our risk through vulnerability assessment. We'll use some of the tools in order to do that. We'll take a look at how we can protect our systems. So whenever that you see the term host, that just means that it could be a computer, like a desktop that you see, a laptop. An endpoint device would be your mobile smartphone, right? Or something that's attaching to the larger network. Or that could be an IoT device that you see in the hospital to be able to monitor patients' heart rate. So it comes in many different flavor and form. This is why cybersecurity is such a vast and highly demanded area, because no one knows everything, right? We cannot be jack of all trades, but if we have a really good foundation to start, we would be able to have a better understanding of how things work and how we can protect those things. And patching and being able to update system and having more preventative measures, we'll spend a little bit of time on that, like updating your system, fixing and updating your firmware. And security mostly is going to be focused around networking. I emphasize this in my ethical hacking class because when you deal with attacks, it's all about where it's coming from, which target it's hitting on your network, how you can contain it in certain area. So having the knowledge in networking is very important. I want to emphasize that again. Networking knowledge is 90% security. I'm not lying, right? So if you're strong in that area, it's gonna make more sense. So for example, right? If someone is attacking a web server, if I have an unsecured website, a web server, they're gonna try to attack through a port number, which is a value that we give for a certain service, like port 80. So when you visit a website like http so-and-so.com, you're using HTTP service and that's hosting through port 80. Think of a port is like an open window. If I have a big mansion and I have all my doors and windows open, likely someone can enter through those doors and windows without me knowing. But if I have a better protective measure, like maybe I can have guards around the door, maybe I can have gates so that way it's harder for them to go through and to get into those doors and windows. So firewalls and intrusion detection systems are alarm systems, and those gates and the guards at the doors that you see. So what we're doing is we're using security appliance to be able to have a better, right, control of what's coming in and what's leaving. And everything is connected. When you go to a taco shop, right, you scan your credit cards, that's connected to a network. They're entering your order and it goes to the screen to be able to print out so the cook can prepare your food. That's a connected system. Buying grocery checkout, that's a connected system. Everything we touch pertains back to networking and how we protect that network. So with that, what we would see is we would be able to look at different type of services and protocol. We'll talk about network time protocol. We'll talk about system logging. Cybersecurity sometimes can be fun and adventurous, right? A lot of the times it's about looking at logs, okay? Some of you have seen this in movies and shows. We look through things for abnormal events, right? Processing the data. So what that means is it's kind of like you wanted to, there are 1,000 people entering the building. And out of 1,000 people, you want us to identify that one individual that's gonna cause havoc, right? And so we want to zone in, and by looking at that, and when you're looking at logs, you're actually reacting, right? Things already happened. If they already enter your system, things been done, right? Data's been taken. You hear about hack cases where they've been in there for months and nobody detected it, right? It's been going on for 3 months until somebody said, uh-oh, I think we've been attacked, right? Our data been lost, and then you have to map out where your data goes. You have to find and be able to control that. Then the customer is gonna get these things, oh, here is, a McAfee service to be able to monitor your system and maybe your credit monitoring tool because your account has been breached, right? By regulation, you have to notify the customer in the case of breach, and you have to report that, but when you're being attacked, you have to report it. In the case where, it's impacting the organization, you have to report it to the federal, like FBI, to come investigate that. So there are a lot of like different components that are going on in the case that when we're investigating or even when we're preparing security solutions to be able to better protect the system. We'll take a look at wireless, how that can be an area that we need to focus on having better protection. Every network has a wireless network, and we want to make sure that we have measures for our wireless network, right? As you are sitting in this class and you ever use public Wi-Fi, stop, right? Because if you are on public Wi-Fi, likely there's someone looking at you, right? It's very easy, yes. Even two-step verification. So in this week, in my classes, right, and you guys are gonna experience that too. We are going to run network monitoring tools. Those are sniffer, like Wireshark, right? So if you're on Wi-Fi and I'm on Wi-Fi, let's say at the airport, right? I run a network scan and I'm looking, so it's gonna scan everybody, right? It's looking at you downloading a file, it's looking at him, looking at, some kind of website, it's looking at her. So it's basically looking at everybody's traffic, right? And so if I'm malicious, I just decided that I'm gonna go for you, right? I'm gonna pull your packet and I can modify the content of your packet, right? And that's when it starts, okay? So if you can see other people on the wireless network, they can see you. Now, in some public Wi-Fi, they are a little bit better where they give you temporary username and password, like at the hotel or somewhere that you visit, like at the coffee shop. That is a little bit better, but hey, I can buy a coffee and I can sit there and I can scan too, right? Or if it's a public Wi-Fi, I can sit in my car and I can use the device and I can kick you out and I can make myself the trusted router and boot the other one. So that's called the evil twin attack, where I can make a device, right, like the trusted router and be able to do that. So I'll bring in the device so that way you can see how that's done. It's been done many times, right? So it's nothing new, but we wanted to make sure that we understand wireless security. And then we want to also know about access control. When I did my dissertation and my doctorate, I spent a lot of time on like access management and risk management because in my personal opinion and professional opinion, access control is the one key component that really brings back everything. Earlier, you mentioned that there's multi-factor authentication. Before that, right, people were committing identity theft, and they still do, right? Getting your phone number and so on, because as long as they have an email or access to that, they can still obtain your identity and be able to commit credit card fraud because it's doing two-step validation. But we'll take a look at the process of how we can better manage our account, especially cloud-based account and also our user accounts, right? And internally and externally for our company. And then we'll go into cryptography. Encryption is important. The time that you visit a secure website, HTTPS,
until you use BitLocker. That's what you use for encryption. We'll look at different type of encryption, what's used, what's best, what's slow. Encryption is resource heavy. It does require a lot of processing, a lot of, like if you heard about cryptocurrency, I'm sure everybody knows about it now, right? It used to be like one of those things called Bitcoin, what is that, right? But cryptocurrency for blockchain been around for a long time. It is slow, okay? If you trade on it, and it is reachable, it's just a little bit harder. So the measure is about having the extra step, making it a little bit more challenging. So that was the whole point, is to buy time. And then we'll talk about how a security solution ultimately we want to make sure we have business continuity. Availability is essential in the triad of CIA for cybersecurity, right? We must make sure that business continue, because if business don't have continuity plan and they don't have the solution for that, likely they will go bankrupt or have loss, right? So, we wanted to also address disaster recovery plan in the case that you have breach, right? That could also be accidental things like data leak, that people sending out data accidentally. We'll talk about different things like that. And then how we can mitigate and be able to accept certain risks and reduce certain risks. And then in some cases, we can remove certain risks. Okay? So we'll talk about qualitative and quantitative. So comparing this to the next level class, which is the CISA plus certification, it's going to go over the same concept, but it emphasizes more on the analysis of cybersecurity for the analysts. So they focus a lot in this area, comparing to the security plus certification, which is more of like the broader foundation of security practices. Any questions? Okay, so this is what you are to achieve in this class, right? We're supposed to gain the understanding on how to identify the principles or the tenets of information security. And then we're able to perform risk assessment and risk management for components and information and data. We will be able to look at security for hardware and software, and then looking at attacks and how to better protect our system or prevent attack from happening. We would be able to control our risk. A lot of the times, most companies would accept some risk, and then they would be able to remove some of the risk. So for example, if you have a disgruntled employee that like delete your data, that gives out information, to remove the risk is to fire that person, right? Done. But it might not be that simple. If that person is key in some operation, we have to be able to transition, be able to train, and be able to build someone into that position, and so on. So we have to take a look at how we can implement rules and be able to adapt those rules to make sure that we fulfill rules, standards, right? What the industry practices, and so on. No prerequisite for the course. Advice that you have taken CIS 1A and 25. That's fine if you're currently in it. I suggest that you would take these classes. It would help you get a better understanding of hardware and software. I recommend this book. You don't have to buy the book. If you want to use the book to study, that's good. You will be provided with test out access to have the practice test, and CompTIA bought test out, so it would have a similar version of the book, so you can use that. We're currently using the 701 study guide, which is for the current examination. I know that the 601, they just retired about a year ago. Yeah.
About the book, I tried to go to the bookstore, the book, they said they have no available.
Yeah, I had put in my order, my book request a while back, but a lot of the times they don't carry. Best thing is, I hate to say this, but Amazon, right? Or you can also find used ones on online bookstores. But, you know, you can get a digital version probably cheaper than the actual copy, but some people prefer an actual hard copy, so. But I don't require the text, I provide all the notes for the class. So I take content from this book and other books and I put together my notes. Yeah,
So I was reading this, the vouchers, you're supplying us the vouchers to make this class?
yeah,
Or-
up on completion of the class. Yeah,
Oh.
so if you finish the 27, you can email me or you can let apprenticeship, team know and they will let me know. And then what we do is we buy bulk voucher from CompTIA. And I would give you a voucher and it has an expiration date, so if you want to go for
You have to be part of the,
apprenticeship program, yes, because it's funded by the grants that provided for apprenticeship. It does, there are some funds that are coming from Strong Workforce, which is a regional funding from state. But that buys you the practice test, the test out. Yeah, so we supply the vouchers from grant funding. Okay. Yeah, so, it doesn't, so if you are NBC, I'm in charge of dispensing the vouchers to you. If you're from RCC, I know John Wilson and Skip Berry. Skip Berry is the lead faculty over there. They'd be able to help you with that. I think John Wilson is the apprenticeship director. And he'll be able to do that.
there's cybersecurity club here?
Say it again?
Is there a cybersecurity club here?
No, not yet. There was some interest in that. I'm a co-advisor for TEC, which is the Technology, Engineering and Computing Club. They kind of put everybody into one group. I did ask if I can branch off and be the advisor for cybersecurity, but right now ASMBC said not yet. But I am looking for students to compete in the California Mayor's Cup that's coming up in March. So if you're interested, competition is great on your resume, right? I coach on NCL sometimes, but if you are interested, we can get you signed up and then you can practice before we go for the competition. And I'm hoping that, I rank within the top 3 this year. There's 20 colleges that are, but no pressure, right? It's fun. So they said that I can have multiple teams. So right now I'm just looking for 5. So once we fill that, we can look for another group. But I know Skip Berry, he's leading the one for RCC. And I know Chafee is competing. Some other colleges are competing as well. Okay, so let's talk about assignments. Assignments are usually due at the end of week on Sunday, not necessarily at the end of class. But if for some reason you don't submit it within the week, if it's a week late, it's 10% deducted. 2 weeks late, 20% deducted. 3 weeks late, 30% deducted. I prefer not to take anything above 3 weeks. But things happen, just let me know, right? Send me an email or Canvas message. I'm very flexible. Some of you have me before, right? I will work with you except for final exam and the last part of the class. It's just because we have deadlines and it's just harder for us to kind of extend things. And I want you to be accountable for some of the more important deadlines that we're gonna face, okay? So there will be due dates on Canvas. We will have a practice exam, 90 minutes, 90 questions. So I had a student that met me during office hours just now. She was saying that she requires accommodation CompTIA. They don't necessarily accommodate that. So when you go through the practice test, there's accessibility component, but the timing is that, right? 90 minutes, 90 questions. So your objective for this practice exam is get higher than 80%. The higher your score, the higher your grade, right? But in order to pass the real certification, you have to pass it with 80% or more. So if you take the first attempt and you score 90, great, right? You're ready for the test, email me, right? I'll give you a voucher and you can set up the time to take the test. But if you score lower, you can keep trying until you get higher, and that you have access to test out for a year, 12 months. Okay?
Question?
Yeah.
For the practice exam, is the question the exact same
It's not exactly the same as the real certification, but it's the same company that's issuing the exam. So in the exam itself, you get a pool of 900 questions. It randomly draws from the 900 questions. And whenever they modify that, they will add new questions. So whenever you see the test change, they might increase a number of questions and then modify some of the questions. So if you practice enough, you're gonna get similar questions. Not exactly the same wording, but very close, right? And then you have quizzes. They're really short and sweet. They're periodic, like every 2 weeks or so. You have 3 attempts on the quiz. The highest score, it will be recorded. Normally, quiz is due at the end of the week on Sunday night. And then for the final exam, I will use Lockdown Browser. I know Lockdown Browser is not the greatest, right? Right now, that's what we have. So, just make sure that you have appropriate, and you have to install it within the final exam. You cannot just go and pre-install it. It's exam link specific. Okay. We'll have extra credit opportunity. It never exceeds about 7% or so. It's supposed to help lift your grade if you're at the border. For example, if you're at 88 and you want an A and you did all the extra credit, likely that it's going to help lift it to like a 90 or higher, right? So, but if you're at a lower grade, like let's say I'm at 70%, I want an A, likely that's not going to happen. So we want to make sure that we look at it from a realistic standpoint, because I've had students in the past that email me, I did all the extra credit in your class. Why am I not getting an A? But I had a 75. And I said, well, because you had a 75, right? The best I can do is maybe get you to a high C or even, closer to a B, but not an A. So we want to make sure that it's feasible and fair. Here's my grading breakdown. You have quizzes. That's going to be 10% of your grade. Assignments and participation. That includes class participation and your weekly assignments. That's 35% of your grade. Lab exercises and activities. That's 20% of your grade, and we'll do that weekly for most weeks up till like week 13. Practice exam is going to be 15% of your grade. Your final exam is 20% of your grade, and that adds up to be 100%. And I use the college grading scale, no pluses or minus. And then for attendance, if I don't hear from you for about 2-3 weeks, I do reserve the right to drop you from the course. I prefer not to do that. Just if you have things that happen, just send me an email and let's try to work something out. It's hard to catch up once you fall behind, so try to keep up. And if you need additional help or support, let me know. If you wish to drop the course, make sure you look at the deadline. I think certain cutoff after the 3rd week, it becomes a W, and that impacts your completion percentage and your financial aid. So make sure we look at that. And if you pay for tuition, not using financial aid, they do charge up until you drop, I think. And then if you have issues with other students or anything like that, make sure you talk to me about it. If I can't resolve it, we can go to academic team for that. I do follow by the policy of the college. And then do your own work. In this class, we mostly answer questions, take multiple choice quizzes and exam, right? It's supposed to be able to prepare you for your skills and assess your skills, especially in the area of network information security. So now a lot of my students said, do you mind if I use AI? AI is, I know it's everywhere, right? Like you can use it, but it's really good resource for you to be able to ask questions if you don't know. But in the case that you ask an AI to write, let's say, an assignment for you, that might not be fair, right? So just do your own work and making sure that we understand, because ultimately you are going to have to take that certification and AI will not be there to do that for you. If you need accommodation, you can visit the ARC. They have a Zoom drop-in hours. You can contact them or email them. So you can go to the office. And so if you need accommodation, they will send me a letter and I will accommodate based on that letter, such as extra time for quiz and exam questions. Or in some cases, student would require a note taker and they will be able to accommodate that resource for that student. How can you contact me? If you call that number, it will go to my phone at my office. When I'm there, I will answer. If not, it will send me a voicemail. Send me an email. Usually I reply. Some of you know I work very late, so sometimes I would respond at 3 a.m. in the morning. And so if Canvas message works, email works. If you want to drop in, earlier I had a student that came by to get help with the virtual machine because it didn't work on his laptop. I can help you with that, things like that. So if not, you can pop into Zoom. Here's the Zoom information and link, and I think it's also in your Canvas. So on Monday and Wednesday, 3:30 to 5, I'm at the makerspace. So when you go through the makerspace door, I'm on the left side next to the wood lab. If you're not sure, just go to the makerspace and ask, and they'll point you to where to go. On Tuesday, I'm actually on campus for most part, but I do virtual office hours because I have meetings back to back. So 4:30 to 5:30. And then on Thursday before my class, my ethical hacking class, 4 to 5 p.m. And I think on Thursday, I'm going to try to get to the room earlier because some students, they might need access to the computer. And then if that doesn't work, send me an email or Canvas message to make an appointment. And I'll tell you my availability and we'll work together on finding an appointment time. Any question?
So I do have a question.
Sure.
Would you be able to do the same thing on Zoom to like help with the virtual box?
Yeah, we can share screen. So let's say, if I had a student that a while back that popped in and said, I keep trying to open my virtual machine and it doesn't work. And then we'll look at the process if you did it correctly. Sometimes, so earlier I had a student that came by because he communicated with me on email and it still didn't work. It turned out that the current version of the virtual box is not compatible. So we roll back one version and it worked.
Okay.
So
I'm having trouble like kind of moving as much memory that's needed for it. So I just can't, I was gonna ask you.
Okay, yeah, so we'll take a look at the requirements and what your system can accommodate. Okay, any questions, other questions? Okay, so what I like to do next is let's go over unit 1 notes and then an assignment together. And then we'll work on the lab exercise together. So that way, if you get them done, you don't have to worry about them over the weekend and so on, right? I know some of you already worked ahead. I love that I get the email on the holidays saying, hey, I started looking at your notes. That's awesome. And I think the lecture and the lab videos from last time I taught this last year is already there. So you can click on Unit 1 notes. You can view it on the page itself or you can download it. Okay. And then while we're looking at this, we're going to look at assignment 1, which is on the next page. So we'll answer these questions together. Okay, so there's some linked information about CompTIA Security Plus 701 version, right? So some of the things that they're looking for when you're preparing for the certifications is to make sure that you understand security posture environment, making sure you know how to monitor and secure. When you're entering this field, a lot of the terminology is difficult. But once you started to know what they are and using them repeatedly, it's gonna get easier, okay? 20 years experience, all my students says it's hard to understand security because there's so many terms. So once, make notes of the terms, get used to the terms, and then as you look at how it's used or what they are, right, it's gonna get better. And a lot of the text question is around that. So to be able to secure hybrid environments like, your local systems along with cloud-based systems, mobile IoT, looking at how we talked about risk, governance, right? Implement regulations for compliance, and then be able to look at incidents and events. So we'll take a look at event logs, and so on. So your exam domains will consist of these areas. General security concept, only about 12%. Your threats, vulnerability, and mitigations, including malware and risk assessment, vulnerability assessment, that's 22%. Your architecture is 18%, security operations, 28%. We'll break it down to what these are. And the program management and oversight on how you can implement management strategies, that's gonna be 20%. So after you take the exam and pass it, you get the certification for 3 years. And then if you want to continue it and not having to retest, you just need to make sure you have CE, which is continuation credits. And that can be through taking courses, attending conferences, seminars, and so on. So the security goals, all we're doing ultimately is gonna fit in 3 letters, C, I, and A. Confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And so what we want is we want to be able to look at use case, which is what we want to achieve. So for example, I have a corporation and my goal is to make sure that my system is available at 99.99999%. Why is it not 100%? Well, sometimes we have to take things down, right? For upgrades or for repair, or it might have error, there's not 100%. That could be my goal. Or my goal is to not having any kind of attack, right? Or breach or data leak and here, right? And it really depends on the type of data, the structure of the data, the protection of the system, and so on. So the use case is going to set some form of goal for us to achieve, okay? And we want to focus in the CIA area. So let's go through these things and then we'll answer the questions. So in security, you're going to hear the term actors, what they are, right? They are users, systems that could also be processed to complete. So when we're looking at process, if you go to like those, I go to those stores and they have self-checkout all the time, right? And I think about the process on, when the user first walks up, you have to tap on the screen to hit start scan, right? And then you scan your product. So that's a process. It's a sequence of action to be able to get from point A to point B. And that could also be part of the actors umbrella. Certain tasks to be completed for the operation. And then you might have a precondition. Something must occur before that process to start. So I cannot scan a product to check out unless I have the product in hand. Understand? So that's a precondition. A precondition for a self-checkout is the customer has to walk up with the product, right? Also, you see this with the precondition. Or in the requirement of the process is that, sometimes you have to place the product in a certain area and then scan, right? Because it wants to make sure they do that for theft detection and order, inventory tracking purposes as well, right? And then you have a trigger. What would be able to initiate that start? Okay. Then you have the post condition. What occurs after? So in the case of we have a breach and we're looking at incidents and we're studying it and we're saying, okay, this is what happened and this is the amount of data that we lost. The post condition is that we have to generate a report and be able to disseminate that report so that when we can learn from that case. And then we have normal flow and alternative flow. So the step that we take for, like, for example, we talked about the self-checkout. from start to end. And then the alternative flow, well, you have a manager that comes in and put in the PIN code to override that process to be able to scan that product for you because you're having some kind of issue, right? So, and you can apply this in so many different ways when you're looking at security aspect. So let's go through and answer the question. Number one, what is the purpose of the use case? It's really a way to help security professional or IT professional to identify and clarify the goal that they need to achieve. So if my goal is to make sure that all the systems are patched, right? That could be a lot of things. So I would start with inventory all my systems in my network. That could be laptop, desktop, servers, IoT devices, and so many others. Yeah. So you need to stand up, press your hand down, come back. So that helps us identify and clarify the requirements, right? So if I need to update my system, I need to first look at how many systems I'm working with, what kind of system, what kind of hardware requirements, what kind of updates I want, right? And how long am I gonna be able to do that? How many people that's needed, right? So I want to be able to achieve that by a certain month, a certain timeline. So what are the security goals in the general aspect? We want to make sure that things are confidential, things have integrity, and things are available. So confidentiality means what? Someone that's intended to see certain files, only then, right? Only those people can see those files, right? So we can apply different technology, different solutions for confidentiality. So in my other class for ethical hacking, we went over the same thing, right? Like CIA is like unit 1 in almost all classes. So confidentiality is being able to keep certain information, sensitive in how we control access, right? In how, like, permissions allowing certain people to see, or be able to protect the data using encryption. So that way only the certain people that needs to see have the key to decrypt the data. Like unlock the data from what we have protected, lock it, okay? Then integrity, that means that the data is not changed. The data is intact. So if I send you, right, my job application, I expect that that has integrity. Because if my job application is modified, then, you know, when you get my application, the information on there is not true. So we want validity, accuracy, because we have integrity, right? So integrity is going to give us accuracy in information and valid information. Then we have availability, making sure that the resource is available. So how frustrating is it trying to register for class during the first week and the systems are down, right? Frustrating, right? Now imagine if that's a business. Let's say it's Black Friday and you have a lot of products to sell. And there are a lot of people waiting to buy your product. And then when they visit your website, your web server cannot accommodate. It's just slows down because maybe you don't have the proper resource to scale to, let's say, 10,000 users versus 1,000 users on a global basis. Things become unavailable. You lose customers, right? Because there's always the next competitor. Amazon's gonna get on the customer, right? Or, right, someone else locally, brick and mortar store, Best Buy, someone else, right? So, but then internally, operation is also important. You go to the store, let's say you buy grocery, you walk up to check out, computers are down, right? Can't buy milk, eggs, or whatever you need, or sometimes infant formula. It becomes a problem, right? So availability could also pertain to energy, power. So if you don't have power, we have no computing system. And you guys hear about storm and earthquake elsewhere. If they don't have power, right? You don't have backup power, no gas can be pumped, right? Things cannot be communicated. So you might have to rely on satellite system for communication, which can be slow. And then when it storms, cloudy weather impacts satellite. So we have to take a look at variables and things that would impact our system to make it unavailable. Okay, any questions? So how can we achieve confidentiality? Some of the things, and this is not all of the things, right? So a lot of the disruption that we see that could be caused by humans, right? So for example, someone got an email, enticed them to click a link. They click it, download a ransomware, and it locks everybody's computer. That takes away availability, right? That's because the lack of knowledge and understanding of security. So if you train the user not to disclose information or allow unauthorized access or click a certain link, then there's a less chance that your company will have that disruption with ransomware. Okay. So user knowledge is important in security. And by requirements, I think every industry require at least once a year training, sometime more. We need to implement access control. So when we say permission, that pertains to files and folders. So for example, I'm in sales, I make a bunch of sales data spreadsheets, right? And I want to share it with my manager, okay? So I can allow share permissions with the user who's accessing that. I can make a folder, put it in there, and control the share permission in that. Now, if you can also have NTFS permission in Windows, where you can allow them to look at it, read, change it, modify, save it, edit it, and save it, right? Or even delete the file, right? But as I created, I have full permission, a creator owner. Now, everybody else, I might want them to just look at my files and not edit it. So give them read permission. Now, how is this different to user rights? Okay. When you say privilege, that usually pertains to system operation. For example, I don't give the user the privilege or the user rights to restart the computer. Some network administrator, they would do that, right? Or the system administrator would say, we're gonna disallow all the user to restart the computer. Why? Because when you install application, what does it ask you to do at the end? The post condition is to reboot the computer, so it refreshes, right? Or when you change system time or system information, it requires restart. This is why a lot of the time system administrator, they disallow them, right? So you can implement privilege policy to control system access, where you can implement permission control, permission rules, or permissions to control object access, files, and folders. Understand? Now you see the difference, because a lot of time people lump them up in the same thing. They're two different things. So to achieve integrity, what can we do? And this might be revamped also from ethical hacking class if you were in that one, but hashing is the way that we can control integrity. So when you first make a file, let's say that right now you save your homework, your assignment file onto your computer, your laptop, or even your USB. When that happens, your operating system generates a string of characters, right? Numbers and letters, and that represent cache, okay? Now, each operating system would have its own different variation of algorithm. Think of it like formula on how it would generate these values. Some operating system, most standard operating system allows you to use SHA-256. That's 256-bit SHA algorithm. What that does is it generates a string, long string. Now, once that happens, if the data has integrity, if it's intact and not modified, when you bring it to another computer or send it to a receiver, it should have the same exact value. It's kind of like this. I give you a number, 81, right? And that 81 is going to be whatever that you receive from it. So when you receive my gift, right, when you open that gift, it should show you 81, exact match. It cannot be different. So whenever I modify the file, the computer automatically changes up that value. Doesn't matter. Can they modify the hash? Yes. But a lot of times when you download software from the website, right, they would tell you, here's the software for whatever you want. Let's say you want a music editing software. Here's the hash value for it. Why is that important? Because when you download it, right, you're supposed to check the downloaded hash with the hash on the website. If it's the exact match, it's not injected with malware, understand? But if it's different, could be a malicious file, right? Someone had modified that, changed that file. So hashing is a way that we can do that. Now, digital signature, it just validates that the sender and the receiver has the integrity in the exchange of information or form. And you see this on email, you see this on the form. When I sign it with the digital signature, we'll get into this a little bit more on the process and how it generates that with certificate. And it would be able to make sure that that is the accurate, valid, right, signed file that's being received when you send it via email. Certificates can pertain to applications. So when you install app, you ever see the little message saying allow, microphone, camera, location, you know, those things, right? Those are the permissions that would relate to the app certificate. So the developer, they would say, oh, in order for me to have Google Map, it needs to be able to have the geolocation, right? It needs to make sure that it shows where I am on Earth. So on the certificate, it's going to look at that and be able to say, oh, there's certain allowance in, could be hardware or software capability for that particular system. And then you have timestamp, when that was generated, when that was deleted, and so on. So in forensic, this is very important, okay? Because when you have a file that is accessed, that's different than when it's modified. So I'm gonna tell you why. I might have a file, I open it for a second, oops, wrong file, that's access, right? That it's gonna say last access. When I have a file that's last modified, I open that file and I type a sentence and save it. That means I changed it. At that time, it changed the hash. It generates a timestamp, it's last modified, right? And then I might have a file that I delete. So when you delete a file, in most systems, it will go to the trash bin, right? In Windows, it's recycle bin. And you can bring it back again. But what happens is your file is written onto your disk, whether it's SD or hard drive. It's dynamically writing. This is 25 coming in there. When you have a file, file 1, it's not just storing in one location, file 1. That's too nice, right? Your computer writes it wherever that it can save. That means it's gonna put some here, some here, some here, some here. Just like imagine if you need to stop things and you don't care what order, right? You already have a system to know what that is, just throw things in. And then when you open up that file, the computer is gonna go and it has a way to map
the memory address is where that file is stored, so it's gonna pull all of that from multiple addresses. It's gonna present you with the file. Understand? Now, when you delete, that file goes into a recycle bin. That's what you see, or a trash bin. That space is called a slack space. Okay? So that means that it makes that space of the file that where it used to be available to the next file. But the remnants is still there, right? So someone can still go in and pull it even when you delete things, okay? Because your disk is only gonna make things available and information is gone when it's overwritten or zeroed out, okay? So deleting things doesn't mean it's gone forever, right? So we will see that in 27A. Sure. No. So hashing is just a number that it gives. Think of it like you go to the DMV, if you've been there before, and they give you a number. That's your number for the day. Or it could be a driver license number, and that's what you have for life, right? But if you are a different driver, you have a different driver license number. Hashing is like that. When you create a file, that number is for that file. When that file is modified, it becomes a different thing, so it's a different number. Yeah. And it could have many different hashes. So as you look, you have the original hash, the modified hash, the modified hash. So the more modified, the more changes that you have, the more different hashes or updated. Yeah, and it's a way of it tracking, but it doesn't pertain to storage though. Right, memory location is actually where it's stored, where it maps to it, but hashing is just a value that it gives to it. For integrity. Okay, so how can you achieve, and you don't have to write this verbatim, right? I want to give you more details, so you can, welcome to summarize this. If you like to write it for verbatim, that's good. If for notes, but you know, I'm not referring verbatim. Okay. So a way that we can achieve security is through redundancy. We talked about availability earlier, right? So at home, right? I remember COVID times where, you know, people would say, oh, I'm late to Zoom because my router is not working and, you know, my computer, I have to restart, right? So imagine you go home and your wireless router doesn't work. Your internet is not available, right? You have a single failure. So the attacker, they look at that. They would say, in this network, where can I target to cripple this organization completely? And if everything funnels to one, that is a point where I'm going to target. Okay. So that means that I have to have redundancy, multiple things. Things are backed up, things are repeated. Okay. So that means what? My data that I store on my disk, on my computer, or on my server, that needs to be backed up by mirroring. So mirror is like this. When you write file 1 on one disk, it's gonna mirror exactly the same on the other disk, right? So you're only gonna have 50% of your storage capacity. Why? Because if I have a terabyte on here, it's the same exact data as a terabyte on the other drive. Combined, it's 2 terabytes, but my data is only 50%. Okay? But backup is gonna give you availability. Because when I need it, I would go and retrieve it or recover it in the case that it's corrupted. Right? I have the same exact file backed up. We'll talk about, I'm sure you heard about like different type of backup and also this type of backup. We'll come back to that. Then you have server redundancy. You might have a group of servers that would be used in the case that your main servers are failing or down. Okay.
you can also use virtualization services through, virtual hypervisor, virtual technology, or even cloud-based services. That's gonna give you availability. Now, cloud solution is great. It's cheap, it's very affordable, it's abundant, like AWS or Azure. But cloud only works if you have internet connection. So if they kill your internet connection, you're done, right? So we want to make sure we don't just have a single router that routes all your traffic. We have multiple routers. We can also set up different things like proxy and so on to monitor and etc. And then you have site redundancy, where you have backup actual physical location. So in the case that if you're looking at like maybe manufacturing company, where if they produce products and it's highly demanded or whatnot, right? They would have alternate location where they can go to in the case if something happens to the facility. Okay, earthquake, storms, you name it. So hot site is something that's ready 24/7 that they can go to, very expensive to maintain. Cold site is something that's like a bare building, and then they will bring in the equipment to start working. And then a warm site is they have some spare systems, and it's a little bit more than a cold site, but less than the hot site. And then they have now a mobile site, which is on 18-wheelers, trucks, or RVs, where they can dispatch. So mobile company like Verizon, communication company like Verizon, T-Mobile, Spectrum, things like that, they would have like, a smaller infrastructure on their trucks or RVs, and they will be able to send that out to the location that needs it. So backup just means that you have duplicative data. In the case that someone deletes it, in the case that if you have application errors, in the case that if human error occurred, right, it makes it available for the users and for the system that needs it. So for example, right, you might have a database that crashed and there's nothing that you can access as far as product information. So we would need to go to the last backup and pull the data. Or sometimes people delete files, right? So if they didn't get a raise, they're disgruntled, they start deleting files because they're gonna quit or get fired anyways, right? So boom, you lost some files, so you can go to the last backup, because yesterday the file was there and I backed it up, right? So that's a good way to have redundancy, and that's gonna give you availability. We need to have power. I mentioned that before. So, long ago, I taught bachelor and master classes, and their solutions like, oh, I'll just put in some UPS or UPS. Uninterrupted power supplies, right? If you've taken CS25, right, they talk about this. So basically, it's a box, and if you try to get it, it's very heavy because it is a battery, right? Think about like car battery, how big that could be, fit into a technical looking box. Now, these uninterrupted power supplies really intended to last for maybe a couple of hours. A good one will be like a few hours. A cheaper ones that you see for a couple $100, that's probably like less than an hour or about an hour. So that means what? Maybe I can restart a server and maybe grab some essential data or settings. But if I want something that's long lasting for like months and days and weeks, right? In California, we're lucky because we can have solar and battery power. But a lot of the other organizations in other states, you see that they would use generator, gas-based generator or other form of generator. So that would be able to give them backups, and that would address availability. And then lastly, you need to have some kind of cooling system. So what's the temperature that your computer likes most? Cool. What is cool? Cool to the computer is not like cool to humans, right? And cool to you might not be the same cool to me. Everybody's a little bit different. So cool means what temperature?
30 degrees Celsius.
30 degrees Celsius. Any other guess? When is it too hot for the computer? And how do you know when it's too hot? Oh, the little gauge, like a thermostat for the computer?
No,
What if it's a server and there's only command line? So when your computer reboots a lot, likely it's hot, right? Yeah, if your thermostat, like what he said, if the gauge goes to red, what is red? High, what is high? And so, based on my experience, right, anything like in the high 70s to the 80s or above that is wrong with the system. If you go into the data center, they like to keep it below 60, right? Your computer is happy most when it's cool. We're not talking about frosty cool, right? But it's cool enough for the server because all of that electrical power is gonna generate a lot of heat. They also have proper insulation and things like that. So what you see is ventilation system and air conditioning HVAC is important. I think Facebook put out a video long ago, and I don't know if they updated through History Channel. They talked about how they build out the data center and maintain all of this. And it's pretty cool. They actually have a water cooling system that's integrated for the data center. So their US data center, what you see is, Omega, I should say, right? When you're on the West Coast, you have a local data center and then you have a backup data center on the East Coast. Why? Because if it's regionally impacted with the environmental impact, you also have that. And then they also have data center in the neighboring country and other part of the world. And this is what you see with a lot of larger cloud companies that implement, they would have data center for different aspects. So a lot of the time when you see West Coast operations, you're gonna see that a lot of their data is backed up on the other side of the country, along with the local, because they wanna make sure they have redundancy. And your data is backed up many, many times. So I was talking to my family member yesterday, I said, you know, the things that live on beyond our time is our digital data, right? And, you know, and then there are also discussion about how that can be written into DNA. Because DNA has great storage and encoding for the DNA. That's a different discussion. Okay, so how can organization improve availability for their system and services? So remove single point failure. Okay, SPF, single point failure. Like I said, at home, your router is the only way that you use to get to the internet. That's a single point failure. If I cripple your router, I take it out, I make it unavailable to you, you're done, right? Making sure that we have backup of our data, making sure we have redundancy of our system, like alternate systems, alternate servers, making sure that we updates and have patches. So that way it reduces some of the risk for like, you know, that would come through firmware or even software or hardware. Any question? Let's look at the time. Okay. So we'll go to about, when we finish, hopefully it's gonna be about maybe 7 or a little bit over 7. We'll take a short break and then we'll come back and do the lab exercise. Any question? Yeah, sure. Today, no, but you do have to submit your question and answers by the due date, which is Sunday. You can turn it in late, but you know, there's late coming to. Sure.
Do you upload any of this stuff?
I don't. It's only the video. Goes up. And then, wait, I would just be giving out answers.
Oh, sorry, just the video, but where would we be able to access it?
to access this information
Or just
or the assignment,
whatever you're recording.
oh, it's posted on your assignment page and video page. So when you go to the, I'll show you where. Okay, so when you click module and you go to unit 1, right? There's a page called lecture and lab video. This is from last year. But I will I change it when I throughout the week. So in tonight or tomorrow. And then on the actual assignment, I will attach a small video. Yeah, I'll make sure you guys see it. But yeah, I will have it available. I took it off because, you know, it's not recorded yet, so it's being recorded now. Okay. Okay, you need number 5? Okay, just for the next question, I just had a student, she's preparing to take the Security Plus certification tomorrow. We spent a little bit of time today talking about elasticity and scalability. Because she's worried that those are the questions that's gonna come up. Likely you're gonna see those on the certification exam. Okay, all right, let's look, we finished 6, so let's talk about 7. So why are scalability, elasticity, and resiliency important in organization infrastructure? So what does scalability means? Scalability means that you can grow, increase the workload, or you can also decrease or reduce the workload as needed. So for example, I am a startup, like, you know, in 2024, right? I started my company and I might make a product that's become really demanded. And in 2025, I have 100% growth. So my system and my workload becomes, it needs to increase, it needs to scale, right? So I want to make sure that I prepare for that. You see this with social media company, right? It might get really popular over time. And then we would make sure that we would be able to handle the workload, the demands of the user, the amount of users that are accessing our system. So scale can mean that we would, you know, manually set it, we would manually plan it. Sometimes you can also automate this process, but we just need to make sure that we can handle the increase or the decrease as needed. Elasticity, and normally you see this term tied with cloud. This is able to have flexibility in how we grow or we shrink. Think of elasticity as stretching and shrinking, right? So for example, December and January are holiday months for the United States, right? You're gonna see that e-commerce websites might have a lot of high demand in this area. So if I'm a small company and I do sell product online, I might have more customers in December and January because of the holidays. So for the cloud, I would choose elasticity model because it's gonna automatically give me more storage and bandwidth need, right? To be able to handle the amount of customers that are visiting my online stores. And then in February or March, when I have less demand, it's gonna shrink it back down. So you're gonna have stretch and shrink. But that is just gonna be able to handle, like, you know, maybe web server, or even, you know, storage in the case of you looking at social media and so on, people uploading, downloading videos, and so on. And then resiliency, that just means that it's a way for our system to recover even when it becomes in fault or error. So that way we would have minimal downtime, right? Self-healing, a lot of that is really built based on data and historical data and behavior. A lot of your system, even when we're looking at automated systems like AI and so on, we can only build it based on the data that we give it. So if we know that historically our system might be down a couple of times a year, we can overcome it, right, by making sure that it would have the proper resources like hardware or even have the proper updates and so on. So that way we can have a system that's self-healing or recovering. And that can be an automated process ultimately. Sounds ideal, right? But a lot of the times you see legacy system in the networks, things that work from 1990s. Some of you were not even born then, right? And it's still being used because guess what? Keep on checking, right? Why would I scrap this? Because I have to back up and archive all the data. Migration is such a big headache from a lot of like the managers and the technicians, is because you have incompatibility with OSs and system developers stop, updating and upgrading. So there's a lot of challenges in when you bringing old data into a newer system. It's very difficult. We deal with that here at the college, and then we also deal with that with all the businesses. Okay, so for 8, it says risk is defined as the possibility or the likelihood of a threat exploiting the vulnerability resulting in a loss. Provide an example of a risk that is identified, okay? So if you're looking at the definition, it's a threat, right? Using the vulnerability to create damage. So that means that we can have possibly an employee that's leaking sensitive data. They might be paid to do that. A lot of times they do, right? Now, can we prevent this risk? Well, some of it we can. We can do more thorough background, like if you get contract for the Department of Defense or the military, guess what happened? They do 7-level background, right? Your neighbor has to validate for you, your friends, your roommates, your spouse, all the people that you know, right? We can check, right, their behavior and their historical, so we can talk to their former supervisor during the background process. We can also monitor and control the data access, right? So we can do a better job at reducing that risk through implementing different type of solutions that are overlapping. That's called defense in depth. Now, if you're looking at an example of a threat and a vulnerability, these two different things, a threat could be a malware. What's a malware? A virus, right? Which is a software that would need your intervention to get it to where it's supposed to go, right? Like a download. You have to click it, right? Or install it. Or it could also be a Trojan. We'll go into malware a little bit more, or a ransomware. So malware can be different types. It could also be an attacker. Someone that is accessing the system or the network in an unauthorized way. So committing a computer crime falls under the umbrella of circumventing the network without authorization, right? That could be through access, that could be brute forcing, it could be a lot of different things. So, and computer crime lands someone in prison for life, right? It used to be 25 years, but no longer, yes.
Without picking points.
Depends on your target, right? So, for example, if I'm paying someone that is open and available, and allow that, I'm okay. But for most companies, if you're scanning against them, likely they see you. I talked about this in my and usually that's not allowable. But would they go for you, right? Only if also what you're using that information for. If I'm paying, trying to gather the intelligence to start attacking, that becomes a crime. So the intention of use of the information. So, like for example, there's a lot of public servers, and people are gonna be able to look for that.
Isn't it technically public information?
But if you can ping them to death, it becomes an attack. Because every time you ping, it has to respond. It's kind of like, I can bombard you with 1,000 questions at once, and then you're too busy, and then you can't answer, and you just, you stop, right? So that's, you can ping someone to death. It can become a crime. There's limitation, there's certain area that we have to look at, but my advice is only get authorization for everything that you do. Safe, right? Because you never know that legal thing that comes back, and you don't want that legal aspect of it to hurt you in the long run. So make sure you have written permission. Okay, so for number 10, it says, which of the following options are considered to be a security incident? And when you get these type of questions on the exam, they're gonna be really close. So the user clicked on the unknown URL, which takes them to an ad of a car dealership. That's not really a security incident. That's just an adware. And that, on the user side, they just click on an unknown URL. And then the CEO laptop restarts frequently. Some files are inaccessible. We are not 100% sure here that maybe malware, something impacted. You can't assume, right? It could just be an OS issue, an operating system or a software issue. Or it could also be permission issue. We don't know, right? And then C is the answer. Ransomware was downloaded. So we know that there's a threat, right? That occurred on the network. And then that impacted the files. Ransomware move very fast. Usually it is non-reversible encryption. So it locks up all the files. Even when for companies that pay the ransom, they usually don't retrieve 100%. And now most insurance company for cybersecurity, there's legal costs in that. So you gotta make sure you look at the fine print when you get policy for cybersecurity. They might not cover 100%, just like how your car is, right? They would tell you, oh, we cover you in the case of accident, but when you find out, it's like maybe for some damages or, maybe for certain things after the deductible. Okay. So what type of controls can be implemented to mitigate risk in general? So there are two main areas you look at for us. In IT and cybersecurity, we operated in these two areas. Technical control, that's something that you can set, configure, modify the settings, right? Change the settings, update the settings, install, etc. Those are part of the technical control. For example, I can configure the firewall to have rules to allow certain traffic from a certain port or certain IP, or reject. Could be IP from different parts of the world, like from Ukraine or China, right? We will block those depending on, what kind of things that we're using. And then password protected accounts. That will be an example of a technical control. Or multi-factor authentication for our accounts. Now, administrative control. These are some of the things that you can implement as part of the operation, like writing a policy, creating and implementing it, making people follow the rules. So policy just entail rules. Train the user, making sure that they have the knowledge and skills that they need. Implement procedures. So the difference between this policy and procedures are step-by-step steps. Like, I would say, in order to remove malware, this is what you would do, right? You would open this application, you would click scan, you would, after you get the result, you would click remove, etc. Where policy is, we would have a list of rules against a certain task that can generate malware, right? Like bring in unknown USB, download from an unknown or questionable website, things like that.
Those are the policies. Okay. Any questions? So the different types of control based on the actions. So you have ABC company using digital locks for all entrances. So physical security is important. Locks provide you with security to protect what's inside that room that's being locked, right? So physical security. And lock can also deter, right? I really think camera system, like surveillance system, is a good deterrence control system. Most people, if they are being watched, they tend not to, they would consider otherwise before they would commit to a certain action. But in California, the rule is that, you guys know, right? When you're recording voice, you gotta make sure that they authorize it. So this is why when you go to 7-Eleven or gas stations, they smile you on camera. But that's no sound is required, right? When you're on Zoom, when you're recording sound, like for your class, it tells you, oh, you have to click okay to authorize that. So that is also, depending on the regulation of where you are. And then you have logs, detective control, so that way you can detect a certain type of breach. Logs are used to identify potential breach. So logs will contain events, information, a list of occurrences in your system. Your system, from the time that it starts up until the time that you shut it off, it has all of the logs, open applications, downloads, install, connect to a certain website. All of those generate events on your system. So in the case, if you have someone is trying to access your system, it's going to report that in the logs, and that becomes a detective control. This, to me, is after the fact. So when you're doing incident response, you're doing detective operations, right? You're going in and looking at what had happened. Okay. Now, can I look at logs to see and predict maybe something can happen? Sure. If you can look at the trend and the pattern in the logs, and you can say, oh, this system might have this occurrences, so we're gonna do this type of control to prevent it. And then C, company requires all employees to attend biannual training programs. That's operational and administrative control. We talked about this up here, right? And because it's for company's operation, that's considered operational control. So sometimes you see overlapping in the controls. And then D, firewall rules are configured to prevent unauthorized access to the servers. So you're configuring the firewall, that should be a giveaway for the technical. And to prevent, that's a key word, that's preventative control. So the firewall is going to be the barrier to block, right? Or allow certain things. So once they are allowed in, they're able to access certain systems. Any question? Throwing a lot of technical terms at you first day, huh? Okay, so for 13, what are the benefits of virtualization? Right, we're gonna use some of that today. Number one, cost. So I can have one computer, right, with a good amount of RAM and a good processor, and I can run 4 virtual machines on it, and each one is a server. So whenever that you are accessing our CCD network, they're running virtual servers, right? Most infrastructure on the cloud or even locally, this is going to reduce the hardware costs with virtualization, right? You have Hyper-V for Microsoft technology for hypervisor, right? And then today we're going to use hypervisor VirtualBox. That's through Oracle. And that's free. We're just using the player for that. You can also use that to create your virtual machines. And then you can have virtualization server, right? If you guys are interested in Microsoft certification, that's also helped. A lot of companies use Azure because everybody uses Outlook for, or Microsoft Exchange and Outlook. And then that's gonna allow you to do testing. So in cybersecurity, we're gonna do a lot of this. Testing and simulation. Okay, so you can build a testing network and be able to look at, you know, how it withstands security before you start rolling out that solution. You can also simulate and you can sandbox things with virtualization. So you can simulate, let's say you reverse engineer a malware, and then you want to recompile it and simulate it and see how it runs and it comes across the network. So you can have a control environment for that. And then you can use that for training as well. Can I bring down 13? Do we still need 12? Yeah. Okay, I'll bring down 12 to the next page so everybody can see. Is that okay? So for 14, how does network reconnaissance help in security? And you guys hear this recon, right? Some of you took my 27B class already. Some of you are in it now. Some of you are interested in becoming a pen tester, right? Reconnaissance in the network is to be able to find information or details about your systems that are connected, as much information as you can. But in that process, we are gonna look at, you know, maybe the flaws, the vulnerabilities in our network. We would also look at, you know, what areas we can grow, improvement area for our network. That's gonna help you troubleshoot and implement security solutions. So this is why companies would hire, right, pen tester or security people to be able to perform pen testing, or, you know, or hire ethical hacker to be able to come in. And the first step is to do reconnaissance. So when you hear the term reconnaissance, it's really about gathering details and information about the systems in the network for security and troubleshooting. Sorry. Oh, we still need 12? Okay. So what I'll do is, and you can try this command on your computer. So some of the questions on the certifications, it's gonna ask you about commands on how to find information. Okay. So ARP is a protocol, address resolution protocol. And in this industry, we must remember all the acronyms. I know it's hard, right? We go around talking in 3-letter acronyms all the time. ARP, right? Or other acronyms like HTTP. But the protocols that you use really pertain to the services on your system or on your network. So ARP stands for Address Resolution Protocol. This is how it's going to resolve the address for your computer. Now, ARP is useful as ARP records can pertain to how one system will be connecting to the local switch and the rest of the network. So as you're sitting at the computer right now, right, that physical system is connected to a switch and other switches. So as it would be resolving a physical address to a network address, like an IP address, it needs to make sure that it maintains the record so it can quickly reconnect. Okay? That's why the term cache is involved. So cache is temporary memory that's used as a reference for future connection or future use. So when you're doing a cache, so to do this, you would open up command prompt. So on your Windows search bar, you can do CMD. You can try this. And open up command prompt. So you see command prompt, you don't have to run it as administrator, but like that. And then we can do ARP-A. So how did I open up command prompt? I searched down here for CMD for command prompt and then open up the app. It's the black box. And then I type in ARP-A. And this will tell me the information of the network that I'm connecting to and so you see the IP address and the physical address. I mean, yeah, the MAC address. So the physical address is ingrained onto the network adapter of that system. So when you see FFFF like this, that's a broadcast address. System, sometimes broadcast, system, sometimes, right? It would be unicast sometimes, and you know, that goes into a little bit more networking. But you do see various in the addresses. So you can have an interface, right? And it would tie. So on the ARP table, you would see that there's an IP address and it's correlating that with a physical address, a MAC address. Okay. So when they do ARP poison, what they do is they modify the content of that table on the switch. Okay. On the appliance that your system is connected to. So that means that they would go in, right? They could also spoof, they could do other things, but ultimately the content of the ARP table is modified. That's called ARP poison. So ARP-A, that's going to give you all the records of your ARP system. And you can try this at home to check out your computer ARP table. Okay, so now you know how to do ARP. ARP. And in Linux, right, you can use chmod to be able to change file access permission. So let's say, yes, question.
I did what you did. 1 minute. Yeah, but it-
Space dash A.
oh, space.
Yeah, you have to complete it with all the rest of space dash A. So this is called a switch or an option, right? And if you're not sure, you can do help option, so ARP dash help, and it will be able to give you more lists. But okay. So in Linux, when you do chmod, this allows you to change access permissions, right? And Linux permissions are a little bit different. We'll get back into this in a little bit. So sometimes if you get an error, access denied, right? You do not have permission for this folder or file, then you need to elevate your privilege. So you would need to do sudo su to root, or you would need to do sudo super user do, and then do a chmod command for that folder or file. And then put set your permission. And Linux uses number like 0 or 7 for permission. Okay. And you can find this information on my notes as well. I forgot to leverage that back, but read the notes. Okay, let's look at 17. So in Windows system, what type of log records successful and failed events related to security audit and access areas? You don't have permissions to this as a student user on the computer here, but at home, if you want, you can search for event viewer. That is going to allow you to look at the information for security logs. So let's say that we have a user that logs in successfully, we can have that tracked, right? Or if they open up a file successfully, that's going to record it. Now, you also have failed attempt. So for example, if someone typed in the password 5 times and it's wrong and they get locked out, it's going to report that as failed attempt. So some administrator, they would only report the failed events. What's the benefit of that? Well, it saves storage because there's less events to be reported. But guess what? Attackers, they're very smart in doing their homework, right? If they're gonna access something, if I only have a small window of time to do things or a small chance, I'm gonna do it right? So I'm gonna successfully get in and not let you know. Instead of, only the newbs, right? The people who don't have the proper experience is gonna have to be here. Because this is gonna set off alarms. Oh, well, these are the failed events, the system is gonna detect it. So now some administrator, for most part, they would report both. And so you need to look at these logs and these logs, okay? Because it's not always here that you're gonna see things, but it might be here that you're gonna find things. Almost there, almost done. Okay, 18. What's the purpose of security information and event management system? SIEM, you're gonna see this a lot, SIEM. It is a centralized management system that is going to pull all the data and the events information from security information from like your intrusion detection system. That could also be your firewall, notifications. And it's gonna collect all of that and it's gonna help you analyze that. So in security management in large enterprises, we rely on the SIEM system. Okay? Now you see variation of the technology, different products, but ultimately it's a way that we can collect security data into one system. And it will be able to give you graph, you can, use analysis tools with it. A lot of the new ones are very intuitive, so it's great. You can also change the settings to make sure you track certain type of data. Now in Linux, where can you find security logs? I already talked about Event Viewer in Windows, right? In Linux, it's in syslog. So if you have operating system error, it's there, right? If you have access issue error, it's there, right? So syslog, you can go to var directory log and then syslog for most of your releases. I know it's long. I'm getting there. Sorry. Almost last question and then we'll take a break and then we'll start the lab. Okay. So what type of information can be discovered by evaluating email application logs? Why is email application log important? A lot of things coming in and out of email, malware, right? Phishing email, leaked data can be transported via email. Metadata information is, you guys know what metadata is? Some of you know, right? You ever take a picture on your phone and you look at the picture, you look at the metadata, it will tell you like the type of file it is, its property, sometimes geolocation where it's taken, right? So the metadata information, it's gonna give you the email header information. When we get into the forensics, this is important. The email header contains the sender, the receiver, and all the system in between. All the servers that's so let's think of it this way. I need to send a package to you. I take it to my local post office here in Moreno Valley, right? They put a sticker on it and it gets sent. But guess what? There's a lot of different post office and airplanes and trains in between. The header is gonna tell us that information. All of that information, which email servers that it went to, right? Who passes it on? How did it get from sender to receiver, right? And then the server software information. So when you getting those phishing email or fake email or those, impersonation email, you can dissect that
through the email header and the main data. Even attachment types, like.
Any questions? Okay, so I'm gonna stop the video real quick.